What's up, guys? 5-Star Paintball Tech here, and welcome to part one of two What's up, guys? 5-Star Paintball Tech here, and welcome to part one of two of the Boiler Room series for tonight. This series is going to be based around what do I do when I just buy a new-to-me Intimidator, or any used one, or one that's been sitting in a closet for a long time, or even taken out of your own closet. This is what I'm going to recommend you do in terms of maintaining the regulators. And then in addition to that, I also get asked a lot, what's the best upgrade I can make to my Intimidator? And my recommendation is to make sure that you have a very well working LPR. This video is going to be around how do I rebuild an LPR for an Intimidator. This is going to cover it for a Gen 3 and 4 LPR. That said, a Generation 2 or even a Generation 1 LPR from like a classic is going to operate the exact same as this. The only difference is going to be you have a different shaped body, which takes a larger piston, and also piston spring, as well as the adjuster plate. And outside of that, the internals, i.e. the Schrader valve, are going to be the exact same. So we'll walk through how to break this down as well. We're going to start with just the basics of the LPR. We're also going to walk through how to attach the LPR to a volumizer. It's not as easy as just screwing it in. And then we'll do a full breakdown of the internals, and I'll walk through some of the failure points of the LPR as well. So to kick it off with the basics, why care about the LPR? The LPR is kind of the driving force of the gun. You could think of it as like the lungs of the marker. What the LPR is going to do is ultimately tell the solenoid, or it's going to send pressure to the solenoid, that then tells the solenoid how hard to hit the valve via the ram and the poppet. So if we have a LPR that is not regulating, typically what happens is it bypasses, your LPR basically acts as a gas through and sends all the pressure that's coming out from your high pressure reg straight to your solenoid, which is not good. That's what's going to kill your solenoid. So we want to make sure that your LPR is in good working form. It's going to give you nice consistent shots, and is also going to as a result of the pressure that you end up using, is going to tell you how much kick to have, the marker is going to have. So to dive deeper into the basics, we're looking at a Generation 4 LPR here, which is the exact same as a Generation 3. For a Generation 2 LPR, I typically recommend setting them to about 80 PSI is where I found that the optimal working pressure is. For a Generation 3 is going to follow suit. Generation 3s, and actually Generation 1, 2, and 3, I found work best at an operating pressure of 80 PSI on the LPR. For a Generation 4, however, it's a little bit different. They were made to operate at a lower pressure on the LPR so that you don't pop the O-ring on the poppet. So the recommended LPR pressure for a Gen 4 is anywhere from 60 PSI to 65 PSI. If you go higher than 70 PSI, that's really when you risk blowing the poppet O-ring off, and that's going to give you a nice leak down the barrel. So those are the standard operating pressures. I don't recommend chasing super low LPR pressures. The reason for that, one, the solenoids are really meant to work they're labeled at 25 to 100 PSI. Bob Long did more R&D than any of us did and spent a ton of money on it, found that they worked at best between a range of 75 to 100 PSI. So that's the first piece. The operating pressure of the solenoid really works best between 75 and 100. Second piece here is if you chase, sub 60 PSI pressures on your LPR, typically what ends up happening is you end up having to compensate with a high pressure regulator pressure, which is going to increase your chances of breaking paint, just due to the amount of pressure running through the bolt. The other piece too is that it's going to make the gun sound like crap. It's going to sound really loud. You're just making the ram work a lot harder than it needs to, just to run at a 50 PSI. I think it's kind of like a vanity metric. It's really not going to make a difference. It's not going to be any easier on paint, because what you're lacking now in the forward motion is now being overcompensated in the pressure that's actually coming through the bolt. So I recommend sticking to that 80 psi pressure range for Gen 1 through 3, and then 60 to 65 for Gen 4. So that's the basics in terms of pressures. In terms of maintaining it and what you're going to use lubricant wise, I recommend Dow 55. That's what Bob recommended from the factory. Just works great. It's what these regulators were designed to work with, so why deviate? And then to maintain the regulator, tools you'll need will include a needle nose plier and then a flathead screwdriver. You could use a larger one than this. A larger one works well too. So I think we got a lot out of the way right there. Let's dive into the regulator itself. You'll notice that it looks to be two parts, which you're absolutely correct. You have the adjuster cap, which holds the adjuster screw. To adjust the pressure of the regulator, you're going to turn this adjuster screw with a 3/16 Allen key clockwise. To decrease pressure, you turn it counterclockwise. So that's part one. Part two is the actual LPR body. And there's two important O-rings on this. The first one up front is a 020. This is what seals the low pressure reg up against the inner body of the front block. If this is bad, torn, or you're using too small of an O-ring, you're just going to hear a leak and feel the leak coming from around the front block. This second O-ring in the rear is really important. Typically, and I'll actually show you what they look like from the factory. Typically, it takes a 114 square O-ring is what they're called. This is what they come with from the factory. I actually prefer to use just a regular 114 buna 70 durometer O-ring. And the reason for that is because these get bound up on the inside of the front block really easy and end up getting crushed. If these O-rings, whether you're using the square O-ring or the rounded one, get crushed, torn, or the like, you can even see this one's a bit torn. If they go out of spec, it's effectively going to turn the low pressure regulator into a gas through, which will send basically straight high pressure regulator pressure straight to your solenoid, which is no good. That kills solenoids. So what we'll want to do with this one in particular is dispose of this O-ring since it's bad. And I'm just going to replace it with a 114 round O-ring, and we're going to be back in the game. I'm going to keep it off, or actually, here, no, let's put it on. So yeah, it's really important to keep this 114 O-ring on there. Now, if we want to install the volumizer, there's a few things going on here. Firstly, if you were to just screw the low pressure reg into the volumizer, that's also going to turn this regulator into a gas through, sending straight HPR pressure to your solenoid. There's a correct way and an incorrect way to install it, and what you just saw me do, just screwing it in as is the incorrect way. There's a few steps here. What we're going to do firstly, the 114 buna 70 durometer O-ring that I just put on the base, we're actually going to take that off now. So there's now going to be no O-ring on the base here. And what we're going to do is just move it to the base of the volumizer. And that's because this is going to now basically act as an extension of the low pressure regulator. The second thing that we're going to do is we're going to take a 011 O-ring, buna 70 durometer. And we're just going to put it on the stem of the LPR. So it looks like that. And now we can screw it together. And what that's going to do is it's going to seal against the inner bore of the volumizer, and now it's a true extension of the LPR. So those two steps need to happen in order to make the volumizer happen. Otherwise, you're going to turn your LPR into a gas through essentially, which is no good for your solenoid. So I'm just going to undo this real quick. Take the 011 off. Could go off to the side and actually, we'll keep that on. Okay, so now to dive into the internals of this. The way that this disassembles is by simply unscrewing the adjuster cap off the LPR body. You're then going to be greeted by this silver disc, and actually, if you just turn it over, two things are going to fall out. One, your adjuster plate, It's just a silver disc made out of stainless. And then your LPR spring is also going to fall out. So just kind of put those off to the side. This is where we're going to start to need some tools. So the next piece that you'll find in here is going to be your LPR piston. And we're going to get that out of here simply by taking your needle nose pliers, grabbing the top of it, and then just pulling it out. So this is actually an important piece too. We're going to walk through some failure points. Basically, and it kind of makes the LPR sound like a ticking time bomb. Pretty much any bad O-ring in this is going to cause the LPR to overpressurize, with the exception of the first one on the body, the 020, that will just cause a regular leak. These two O-rings do a few things. One, they help to keep the pressure stabilized in between the piston and the Schrader valve on the inside. They also keep air from passing forward through the adjuster screw. If that ever happens, that's a sign that both of the O-rings are just out of spec. That I recommend lubricating, cleaning and lubricating these O-rings with Dow 55 once every 7 to 10 cases of paint that you put through the gun. That'll keep them, that'll just prolong the life of the O-rings on here. If you fail to do that, what can end up happening is that both the O-rings will run out of spec, and you risk a few things. One, the marker overpressurizing. That usually happens when the rear one is out of spec. If both are out of spec, then you'll get a leak through the adjuster screw right here. And if both are also out of spec to the point where there's just a tiny bit of space for the piston to kind of wiggle around inside of this bore, and you can even see it on this one, it happened. You'll see that the aluminum piston will actually scratch against and rub against the inner wall of it. And that can cause some weird pressure issues where the gauge might actually increase by like as much as 5 or 10 PSI on every shot. If that's happening, that's a good sign that the inner bore is scratched. And unfortunately, that's not repairable. You'll need to get a new LPR body. So yeah, a lot to consider there out of two O-rings. If you do need to replace them, there's actually a few different types of pistons. There's the double O-ringed aluminum, which is what you're seeing here. There's also a single O-ring brass piston. The double O-ring aluminum pistons take two 011 O-rings. The single O-ring brass version will take one 012, and then there's also a double O-ring brass version which also takes 011s. In the case where you have issues getting the piston to not overpressurize, sometimes you might need to switch the 11s to 12s, because that's a good sign that, again, your inner bore on the LPR body is out of spec. Sometimes you could save it by using a tighter O-ring, like or a larger O-ring, like a 012. So yeah, that pretty much sums it up for the piston. Next piece we're going to take out is going to be your Schrader valve. And this is also another important part that can also cause the LPR to overpressurize if it's not in good shape. So in order to get it out, we're going to take our screwdriver. I'm using a small one. If you're using a large one, my recommendation is to actually press down on the pin so that you could get into the flathead hole on the inside. And then you just turn counterclockwise to unscrew it. So I'm just going to get to the side of it with my smaller one, and now everything's going to fall out. So this is your whole Schrader valve assembly. You have the nut here, which has a 010 O-ring on the base. You typically won't find that gives you many issues, but it never hurts to replace that upon getting your new marker. The important piece here is the Schrader valve seal. And that's this urethane piece here. So right now it's yellow. This one's actually in good shape. When they're not in good shape, they tend to turn white. And then from there they start to disintegrate, or they might turn like a translucent purple as soon as they start to discolor from this yellow coloring. That's usually your telltale sign to just replace it. If it's white, definitely replace it. That means that it's starting to deteriorate and turn into dust. If they turn to dust, that's another piece that turns your LPR into a gas through, which we don't want. The good thing is that these seals are You don't have to use the Bob Long ones. These are kind of proprietary to the Bob Long Schrader valves. If you don't have any of these handy, you can always use a 006 O-ring. You could use it in Buna. You could use it in, what's it called? Polyurethane. And Teflon, I think, is the other one that you could use it in. And the only caveat is it has to be a 90 durometer O-ring. So 006, 90 durometer O-ring can be used in place of the Schrader valve seal that Bob put in these from the factory. And then these also have a little spring inside. That's what allows it to reset. So make sure that you keep the seal in good shape. That's what allows the Schrader valve to actually regulate. And then to reassemble, you're just going to drop this back in, wiggle it around a little bit, and it'll fall back into place. You're just going to tighten it back in the same way that it came out. Next part that goes in is your piston. Next part on top of your piston, and actually, good thing to note, the piston is going to go in with the O-rings in first. And then once that goes in, your spring's going to follow, followed by your adjuster plate, and then screw it all together with the adjuster cap. You're back in business. Definitely do not attempt to set your LPR without a gauge. Use the gauge on your front block. The Ashcroft that comes with it from the factory works amazing. Definitely recommend using that. Otherwise, if you're using another gauge, if you want to upgrade to a smaller gauge, just do yourself a favor and make sure that it's a 0 to 160 psi gauge, because that's what's going to allow you to read the pressure accurately, since it has a smaller pressure band. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Again, this is a really just important part to the gun. This video is probably like 15 minutes long, and that's due to just the amount of failure points that there are with these. So just keep the O-rings in good shape. Usually once you set it the first time, they stay set for a while. Just keep up with the maintenance every 7 to 10 cases, and you'll be in really good shape. It's probably mid-February right now. Not probably. It's mid-February right now. By mid-March, I'll have my own supercharger kit for these coming out. The main thing I was going for with them was to have a super fast recharge rate on the regulator, and then improve the reliability of the regulators with both a Schrader new style Schrader valve, as well as a piston setup and a few other parts. So keep an eye out for that. I'll probably be making a post for them once they're available. And yeah, may our guns live forever. Cheers, guys.